The Galactic Council chamber, usually a bastion of solemn order and measured deliberation, hummed with an unfamiliar, anxious energy. Dominating the central dais, a colossal holographic display shimmered, relaying raw, real-time data from light years away. On it, a scene unfolded that defied all logic, eroding the very foundations of galactic understanding. Commander Draxxus, his multifaceted eyes wide with disbelief, felt his vocal tendrils quiver uncontrollably. As a Catharian, he was renowned for his unparalleled analytical prowess and an almost legendary calm in the face of crisis. Yet the image before him splintered every logical premise he had ever held. The display showed a small group of humans, that peculiar, tenacious species from the Sol system, gathered around the colossal, mangled form of a Leviathan Maw. Its thick, bio-armored hide, typically impervious even to a Vorlog hegemony warrior's plasma rifle, lay grotesquely rent open. Dark, viscous fluids, unsettlingly terrestrial in appearance, stained the ground of Draxxus Cinder, a world known throughout the Council as an Exterminator Class 10+ death trap. Draxxus Cinder was no mere death world. It was a verdant yet virulently hostile sphere orbiting a harsh red dwarf, cloaked by an atmosphere rich with hallucinogenic compounds and debilitating gases capable of felling an unprepared creature in mere heartbeats. Its flora was not benign foliage, but a predatory ecosystem unto itself. Razor-sharp leaves could lash out, and vine-like roots, laden with neurotoxins, actively sought to drain vital energy. The planet's weather was a symphony of destruction. Electromagnetic storms pulsed across the sky, acidic rain corroded exposed surfaces, and sudden supercooled winds could instantly flash freeze organic matter. The terrain itself was a jagged nightmare of plasma vents, bubbling lava pools, and crystalline forests whose razor-sharp edges could flay flesh from bone. And then there were the Leviathan Maws. They were the undisputed apex predators, creatures of myth and terror, their very existence a biological impossibility in such an unforgiving environment. Growing up to 25 feet in length, their bodies were a marvel of natural selection. Bioluminescent plates absorbed stray energy. Their speed defied their immense size, and their razor-sharp claws and teeth could shear through reinforced alloys. Their most terrifying weapon was a complex set of sonic emitters, capable of unleashing a focused shriek that could pulverize internal organs and induce instant, paralyzing fear. They had decimated Council research outposts with such efficiency that not a single distress signal was ever fully received, leaving behind only dust and the haunting echo of their terrifying cries. "You mean to tell me they ate it?" Draxxus's voice cracked, the question hanging heavy in the chamber. Admiral Viridian, a figure whose composure was legendary, remained motionless, his gaze locked on the flickering display. He was a Zidonian, a species revered for their strategic brilliance and emotional stoicism, yet even he seemed to be grappling with an unseen force, the Leviathan Maw, a symbol of insurmountable danger, a creature that had shattered the morale of hardened veterans. Yet these humans, these supposedly primitive, emotionally volatile beings, had not only killed one, they were, unbelievably, preparing it for consumption. The playback officer, a junior aide of the sensitive Kilosian species, visibly trembled as he complied with Viridian's silent command. The grainy footage resumed, playing on a loop that etched itself into the minds of every council member present. The humans, their forms appearing deceptively fragile by galactic standards, moved with an unnerving, almost casual efficiency. Their leader, a broad-shouldered individual with a striking scar across his brow, held a crude, sharpened pole. The Leviathan Maw lay motionless, a dark, viscous stain spreading beneath its enormous head. Then, the inconceivable began. Crude blades, fashioned from scavenged metal, flashed. Joints, impossibly, were expertly separated. Strips of glistening, dark flesh, still pulsing faintly, were laid over a portable, self-heating device. The humans chatted amongst themselves, their guttural language filled with an unsettlingly casual laughter, as if they were preparing a simple field meal on a tranquil homeworld. One human, lifting a large slab of meat, sniffed it deeply, then a wide, almost triumphant grin spread across his face before he tossed it onto the crackling, portable fire. The feed abruptly cut out, plunging the chamber back into a thick, suffocating silence. "This is deeply unnatural," Xarthus managed, his vocal frills twitching erratically. "The Leviathan Maw is not prey. It does not have natural predators. It sits at the absolute apex of Draxxus Cinder's predatory chain, unchallenged for millennia." Viridian leaned forward, his clawed fingers drumming a slow, deliberate rhythm on the polished table. "And yet, here we are." Another officer, a Cinderian, known for his meticulous data analysis, spoke, his voice hushed with a primal dread. "They ate it. Without fear, without hesitation. They approached a fallen Leviathan Maw as if it were a common game animal." Xarthus' spines flared, a clear sign of extreme agitation. "We were told humans were adaptable, highly resilient, but this is something else. No sane species consumes the apex predator of an Exterminator Class world. It defies every known biological and sociological norm across the entire quadrant." The Council had known humans were different when they were first brought into galactic awareness. Their home planet, Earth, had already been flagged as a Class 12 death world itself, a nightmarish place of extreme geological instability, ferocious megafauna, and an ecosystem built on relentless, cutthroat competition. Most galactic scholars had theorized that humanity survived through sheer numbers, building sprawling cities and advanced technological shields to protect themselves from their world's myriad dangers. But this footage, this proved something far more profound. The humans didn't just survive despite their environment. They conquered it. They didn't adapt to their world. They bent it to their will. A low, uneasy murmur, a sound rarely heard within these hallowed halls, spread through the room. It was a collective recognition of something fundamentally unsettling. Viridian exhaled slowly, his eyes still fixed on the blank holoscreen, as if willing the images to reappear and offer further, horrifying insights. "I want full reports on these humans, their diets, their physiology, their psychology. If they are capable of this, then we may have fundamentally miscalculated their true potential. We may have underestimated the very nature of their species." A comms officer, typically impassive, stiffened. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the human expedition leader." The room tensed, a palpable wave of anticipation and dread washing over the assembled delegates. "Put it through," Viridian ordered, his voice devoid of emotion, yet carrying an undeniable weight. The screen flickered, resolving into the scarred human's face. He looked remarkably composed, almost amused, as if he had been expecting this very call. A strange guttural chuckle escaped him, a sound that grated on the auditory sensors of many alien species present. "Hey there, fellas. Just thought we'd check in. Everything's going great down here. Plenty of food, though I gotta say, you guys never told us how good this thing would taste." Xarthus' throat tightened, a dry metallic taste filling his mouth. You consumed the Leviathan Maw?" He choked out, the question almost a plea for a different answer. The human merely raised his eyebrow, a gesture of casual defiance. "Yeah, was that not allowed?" A few officers, from species with more sensitive biological systems, visibly recoiled as if physically struck by the sheer audacity of the question. Viridian remained perfectly still, his eyes narrowing slightly. "You killed it, and ate it." The human chuckled again, a sound now more unnerving than reassuring. "Well, we weren't going to let it go to waste." He gestured behind him, where other humans sat around a roaring, portable fire, calmly chewing on large chunks of what could only be Leviathan Maw meat. One of them, a bulky individual with a heavily tattooed arm, raised a skewer in a mock toast, a piece of char-grilled flesh impaled upon it. Zarthus's frills shuddered violently, a visual manifestation of his internal turmoil. Do you understand that the Leviathan Maw is an Exterminator Class 10+ apex predator? It has been known to tear through full Vorlog hegemony units. Their very presence is enough to cause planet-side evacuations. It's delicious, the human interrupted, his tone utterly dismissive of Zarthus's desperate explanation. He took another bite, chewing with exaggerated pleasure, making a point of it.
The silence that followed was unlike anything the Council had ever experienced. It was not merely the absence of sound. It was a profound void, filled only by the echoes of that single, shocking word. Finally, Viridian leaned forward, his voice quiet, almost a whisper, yet it resonated with an immense, unspoken weight. Do you realize what this means? The human grinned, a wide, unsettlingly confident display of teeth. Yeah, he took another bite of his meal, chewing thoughtfully, savoring the taste. It means we've got plenty more to hunt. The transmission cut out abruptly, leaving the council chamber in stunned, lingering silence. The room remained frozen, suspended in a moment of collective existential shock. Then Viridian spoke, his voice barely audible, yet each word landed like a hammer blow. We need to rethink everything.
The truth behind the human's presence on Draxxus Cinder was a closely guarded secret, known only to a select few within the highest echelons of the Galactic Council. It was part of the Survival Proving Grounds program, an initiative born out of a growing, silent apprehension regarding humanity. Unlike other newly discovered species that adapted to galactic norms, humans, with their rapid expansion and unsettling adaptability, posed an unquantifiable variable. They were too unpredictable, too resilient, too human. The Council's fear wasn't of direct aggression, but of their uncontrolled potential. A species that thrived in environments that shattered others, that seemed to view every obstacle as merely a puzzle to be solved rather than a barrier to be respected. And so a covert decision was made. A small, carefully selected group of humans, those deemed pioneering and resourceful, was subtly redirected. Their expedition, ostensibly a scientific survey of a newly charted, resource-rich planet, was in reality a forced insertion onto Draxxus Cinder. A live, brutal experiment. Admiral Viridian himself had overseen the clandestine operation, his Zidonian logic dictating that a controlled test was preferable to an uncontrolled crisis. Their hidden fleet, cloaked deep within the asteroid belt surrounding Draxxus Cinder, tirelessly monitored every breath, every movement of the human settlement, not to offer aid, but to meticulously collect data, to map their limits, to gauge the true extent of their threat. The unspoken goal: to understand, and if necessary, to contain or even eliminate this unsettling variable. Now, watching the aftermath of the Leviathan Maw kill, Viridian felt a cold dread trickle through his strategic mind. The data they were collecting far exceeded their most pessimistic projections. "Admiral," the comms officer's voice trembled, pulling Viridian from his thoughts. They're making plans to domesticate them." A collective gasp echoed through the chamber. Zarthus's eyes narrowed, his multifaceted gaze darting to the officer. "Domesticate?" he sputtered, his voice laced with incredulity. Are you suggesting they intend to breed the Leviathan Maws? To raise them like cattle? The very idea felt like a cosmic joke without a punchline. The officer nodded, a shiver running through his Kylosian form. Yes, Commander. According to intercepted communications, they've already marked several large clearings for enclosures. Their leader, John, as he calls himself, believes the creature's meat is too valuable to rely solely on wild hunts. They desire a controlled, sustainable supply. They even mention something about free-range organic on one recording. A junior Cinderian officer choked, his normally pristine datapad slipping from his grasp. Viridian stared at the screen, his mind grappling with the sheer audacity. They want to turn the most dangerous predator on an Exterminator Class 10+ world into cattle. The words tasted like ash. It was almost comical if it wasn't so terrifying. The silence that followed stretched long, filled with the hum of the holoscreen and the frantic whirring of data processors struggling to reconcile this new, incomprehensible information. Finally, Zarthus spoke, his voice a bare whisper. They are not like us. No species in recorded galactic history has ever attempted such a thing, to actively seek dominion over a creature so inherently destructive. Viridian turned to the comms officer, his command sharp. Get me the human leader again. The officer hesitated, looking uncomfortable. Sir, they're busy. Viridian's gaze sharpened, a dangerous glint in his Zidonian eyes. Doing what? The officer swallowed hard. They are hunting. Again. Viridian exhaled slowly, a controlled release of tension. He gestured toward the screen. Show me. The holoscreen shifted, displaying a new feed from a reconnaissance drone hovering high above the human camp. The humans were moving through Draxxus Cinder's dense bioluminescent undergrowth, their bodies low, their movements precise and deliberate. They carried their crude spears, but now several also bore what appeared to be rudimentary launchers, bulky contraptions of scavenged metals and repurposed tech. A few were positioned on elevated rock formations, their bizarre weapons aimed at an open clearing. In the center of that clearing, bait had been laid. Mounds of pungent, bloodied meat, entrails. A trap. A very human trap.
Viridian watched, a strange fascination mixed with dread. The ground began to tremble, a low rumble echoing through the chamber. A Leviathan Maw was approaching. The colossal beast emerged from the undergrowth, its 25-foot frame moving with an unnatural, cautious menace. Its massive sonic emitters flared, tasting the air, sensing something amiss. It knew. It was aware. Yet the overwhelming scent of fresh meat, a rare commodity on Draxxus Cinder, drew it forward, overriding its primal instincts for caution. Then the humans struck. One of them, perched on a crystalline spire, triggered his launcher. The device made no sound, but the result was immediate. Thick, multi-layered netting woven from an incredibly strong alien fiber burst forth, wrapping around the creature's limbs, cinching tighter with each violent thrash. The Leviathan Maw roared, its sonic shriek now a deafening wave of frustrated agony. But the humans did not flinch. They advanced. The scarred human leader, John, leapt from his vantage point with astonishing agility, spear in hand, landing with a jarring impact directly onto the creature's armored back. The Leviathan Maw bucked and twisted, its powerful muscles rippling beneath him. But John held firm, driving the spear deep into a specific, previously unseen segment at the base of its skull. Another human, agile as a desert cat, followed, jamming a second spear into its pulsating ribcage. The beast gave one last shuddering cry, its sonic emitters flickering weakly, before collapsing, its immense form thudding onto the poisoned ground. The humans cheered, a barbaric, triumphant roar that grated on the council members' heightened senses. Viridian's claws dug deep into the armrest of his seat, cracking the polished plasteel. He murmured, his voice laced with a grim awe. They are not just hunting. They are refining their technique. They have identified weak points we believed non-existent. They seem to treat this as some kind of morbid game. Zarthus swallowed hard. This was no accident. They are learning how to take the Leviathan Maw down more efficiently. They have reduced the risk for themselves, and they appear to enjoy it. On screen, the humans had already begun processing the carcass, but this time something was profoundly different. A few of them, instead of simply butchering, were meticulously examining the creature's muscular structure, tracing patterns on its hide, pointing at key neural junctions, and making careful notes on small handheld devices. They are studying them, Viridian realized, his voice almost an internal whisper, understanding how they move, how they react, their physiology. They will only get better at this. They are treating it like a biological puzzle. Another officer's voice, now shaky with fear, articulated the horrifying truth. This is not a hunt. This is a blueprint for control. Viridian exhaled slowly, his eyes still locked onto the screen. No species has ever attempted this. The Leviathan Maws have always been the top of the chain here, unchallenged, untouchable. A junior officer, trembling, managed to voice the unspoken, "Not anymore." No one disagreed. The room was silent, haunted by the images of human audacity. No one spoke as the holoscreen continued to display the humans working. They had already moved past the idea of merely hunting the Leviathan Maw for survival. Now they were refining the entire process, dissecting its very nature. Zarthus felt his throat tighten. We have always known that humans are different, that they push boundaries where other species hesitate. But this, his voice barely carried, this is unnatural. Viridian remained still, his gaze locked on to the screen. They see no distinction between predator and prey. If they can kill it, they can eat it. If they can eat it, they can control it. A junior officer shifted uncomfortably. Admiral, if this continues, the balance of Draxxus Cinder could be shattered. The entire ecosystem could collapse. Viridian exhaled, a weary sigh. There will be no balance, only humans, and what they allow to exist. Another officer hesitated before speaking, voicing the elephant in the room. Should we intervene? The room tensed. That was the real question, wasn't it? The Galactic Council prides itself on maintaining stability, on non-interference with developing ecosystems, especially on hazardous worlds. But these humans had already rewritten the rules simply by existing in this manner. Zarthus' voice wavered. What do we even say to them? Stop eating the apex predator? Stop living? The very thought was ludicrous, yet no one could muster a laugh. The absurdity of it was too profound for alien sensibilities. Viridian leaned forward, his claws tapping against the table. Send another transmission, now. The comms officer obeyed. Moments later, the scarred human's face reappeared on the screen. He looked mildly amused, as if expecting this call. Back so soon? He smirked. Don't tell me you're calling for recipes. Zarthus's frills twitched. You are destabilizing the ecosystem of this world. The Leviathan Maw... The human cut him off, a dismissive wave of his hand. The Leviathan Maw is a big, angry lizard that tastes amazing with the right seasoning. You guys really missed out.
Seriously, next time ask for the marinade recipe." He shrugged. "I don't see the problem." Zarthus sputtered, "But—" Viridian raised a hand, silencing his subordinate. "You do not understand the severity of this situation. You are altering the natural order." The human tilted his head, a wry amusement playing on his features. "You know what's funny? That's what they said about wolves back on Earth." Zarthus blinked. "Wolves?" The human nodded. "Yeah, back in the old days before humans had big cities, wolves were apex predators, dangerous, untouchable. Then we started hunting them. Some we killed, others we tamed." He leaned in slightly, a mischievous glint in his eye. "Now we have chihuahuas. You know, little yappy things that ride in purses." The notion of comparing a Leviathan Maw to a chihuahua was so utterly bizarre, it nearly caused a circuit overload in the Kylos comms officer. The room froze. A collective, almost imperceptible tremor ran through the council members. Viridian exhaled slowly. "You are comparing the Leviathan Maw to wolves?" "Sir, wolves used to hunt us, now they're house pets," he grinned, completely unperturbed. "It's just a matter of time before we figure out how to make these things work for us. Imagine Leviathan Maw pulling your landers. That'd save a lot on fuel." A low murmur spread across the chamber. Zarthus felt a deep unease settle over him. He had always assumed that predators and prey followed fixed roles. The Leviathan Maw was the top predator of Draxxus Cinder because it had no equal, a natural law. It was not meant to be tamed, farmed, or controlled. But these humans didn't care about what was meant to be. Viridian's voice was calm, a stark contrast to the chaos brewing within him. "You assume you can control them." The human nodded. "We've already started. The first few were tough little brutes, but we're learning fast. Give us a few more cycles, and we'll have them pulling plows, or, carrying our groceries." Zarthus couldn't help but ask, the words escaping before he could stop them. "And if you fail, if they turn on you?" The human chuckled, a sound that, in that moment, seemed to defy all known understanding of logic and fear. "Then we eat them. Again." No one spoke. Viridian stared at the screen for a long moment. "There is nothing we can say that will change your course, is there?" The human's grin remained unwavering. "You ever tried telling humans what they can't do?" Viridian closed his eyes briefly. "No," he admitted, a note of weary resignation in his voice. "I suppose we never have." The transmission cut off. The silence that followed was suffocating. Finally, Zarthus spoke. "What do we do?" Viridian slowly turned toward the council. "We observe. We adapt." He exhaled. "And we remember that humans do not recognize limits." Zarthus felt an uneasy chill run through him. The Leviathan Maws had ruled Draxxus Cinder for centuries, but not anymore. There was a new top predator, and it was hungry, not just for sustenance, but for dominion.
And perhaps a good steak.
The report was finalized. Every detail of humanity's actions on Draxxus Cinder had been meticulously catalogued, analyzed, and presented before the Galactic Council. The findings were not merely unsettling, they were transformative. For centuries, the Council had prided itself on understanding the delicate balance of nature. Predators ruled, prey adapted. Interference, when necessary, was always intended to preserve this balance. But humanity had exposed a fundamental flaw in that philosophy. Balance, to them, was not something to be maintained, it was something to be rewritten. The initial footage of their hunts, though shocking, was merely the prologue.
What followed in the cycles after was even more profound and terrifying. They had succeeded. The Leviathan Maw, once the undisputed apex predator of Draxxus Cinder, was no longer untouchable. The humans had learned to track them with chilling efficiency, identify their precise weak points, and anticipate their every movement. Their crude, scavenged weapons became more refined, their tactics more precise, their coordination almost telepathic. What began as brutal, desperate physical combat quickly evolved into something methodical, almost surgical. They developed nets that absorbed the Maw's sonic attacks, javelins tipped with biodisruptors, and even primitive shoulder-mounted sonic cannons that could briefly disorient the beasts. John, their leader, once remarked in an intercepted comm that they were just figuring out the best way to get 'em tenderized. Then came the true horror for the Council: domestication. It started subtly, with the capture of Leviathan Maw juveniles. At first, the hatchlings had reacted as expected, violently, unpredictably, their miniature sonic shrieks searing the air. But the humans, stubborn as ever, continued to experiment. They learned which unique plant matter from Draxxus Cinder's toxic flora could be processed to create a calming paste. They discovered specific low-frequency hums that soothed the agitated creatures. They meticulously cataloged behaviors that could be reinforced through food rewards and gentle, persistent contact. One human was even observed attempting to teach a young Leviathan Maw to fetch, to the bewildered consternation of the Council's observation team. The first major breakthrough came when a human, a small, unassuming woman with eyes that held an unnerving calm, managed to successfully leash a young Leviathan Maw, guiding it away from its nest without a single protest. The second came when they successfully bred a pair in captivity, proving their understanding of the creature's reproductive cycles. Turns out they're just big grumpy lizards looking for a good home, John had quipped. The third breakthrough, however, was the one that truly changed everything. They rode them. The images, captured by the Council's increasingly desperate surveillance drones, were undeniable. Humans, clad in makeshift harnesses, sitting triumphantly atop the very creatures the Council had once feared beyond measure. The beasts were no longer mindless, destructive predators. They had become tools, weapons, property. Their immense power redirected, their primal fury reined in by a species deemed inferior in raw physical might.
The reports continued to flood in, each more alarming than the last. Wild Leviathan Maw numbers on Draxxus Cinder plummeted as human-controlled populations grew in expansive, heavily fortified biodomes. The apex predator, once the unchallenged ruler of the entire ecosystem, had been systematically reshaped, engineered into something useful, a living asset. And it had all happened in less than a single standard galactic cycle. The Council chamber was deathly silent as the final report concluded. No one spoke. No one dared to. The weight of the revelations pressed down on them, a suffocating blanket of dread and incomprehension. Then, at last, Admiral Viridian stood. His gaze swept across the assembled leaders of the galactic community, his voice measured, yet heavy with an undeniable gravitas. This is no longer a question of containment. It is a question of inevitability. Zarthus, seated among the delegates, forced himself to speak, his vocal tendrils vibrating with a mixture of fear and defiance.
We cannot allow this to continue. The ecological repercussions alone. Viridian looked at him, his expression unreadable, a silent challenge in his Zidonian eyes. "And how do you propose we stop them, Commander?" Zarthus opened his mouth, but no answer came. There was no precedent, no protocol. No species had ever tried to stop humanity from such an endeavor. Indeed, no species had ever needed to. A new voice, ancient and resonant, broke the silence. It belonged to one of the elder counselors, a being from the cryptic Xylosian collective, who had witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations across untold millennia. His words were slow, deliberate, steeped in a wisdom that transcended immediate understanding. "We launched the Survival Proving Grounds program to assess their threat. We now have our answer. They are not a threat to us in the conventional sense. They are a threat to stasis, to the very concept of limits." He paused. "And quite possibly to galactic sanity." A Gorgonax delegate, a warlike species known for their brute strength, scoffed. "Then we crush them, send a fleet, sterilize the planet, before they spread this anomaly." Viridian's voice, though calm, was like ice. "A full-scale orbital bombardment of Draxxus Cinder, an Exterminator Class 10+ world, would be a galactic incident of unprecedented scale. And to what end? To prove we can destroy them? They have demonstrated a resilience to environments that would shred our best destroyers. What if they survive the initial bombardment? What if they adapt to that? And what message does that send about the Galactic Council's benevolent oversight?" The Gorgonax delegate fell silent, the logic, however unpalatable, undeniable. The truth was, no one truly knew how to fight a species that saw the most terrifying force of nature as merely a delicious meal or a future beast of burden. Suddenly, a new transmission alert flashed on the main holoscreen. It was from John, the human leader. Viridian gestured for the comms officer to put it through. John's scarred face appeared, his usual calm demeanor replaced by an almost giddy excitement. Behind him, a massive, domesticated Leviathan Maw, its sonic emitters now fitted with what looked like rudimentary communication devices, stood patiently. It even appeared to be wearing a large, crude saddle. "Hey, folks!" John exclaimed, a wide, genuine grin splitting his face. "Just wanted to give you a quick update here on Draxxus Cinder." Zarthus leaned forward, a grim premonition settling in his gut. "What breakthrough, human?" "Well," John gestured to the Leviathan Maw beside him, which let out a surprisingly gentle, low rumble from its modified emitters. "We figured out how to control their sonic abilities. Turns out, with a little trading, they can emit specific frequencies that stabilize the atmosphere. We're talking localized weather control, guys. Those acid storms? Gone. Electromagnetic pulses? Redirected. We can literally clear pathways and make entire zones breathable and habitable just by having these big guys hum the right tune. Saves a fortune on environmental suits." A collective gasp echoed through the council. Viridian's eyes widened almost imperceptibly. This wasn't just adaptation. This was terraforming, using the planet's own apex predator as a tool to bend the very environment to their will. It was monstrously ingenious. "And that's not all," John continued, oblivious to the council's stunned silence. "We've also discovered that the crystalline flora, while dangerous, is incredibly rich in rare minerals. And with the Maws clearing the way and stabilizing the ground, our mining operations are going through the roof.
Draxxus Cinder isn't just surviving anymore. It's going to be a major resource hub for humanity. We're even thinking of setting up a few tourist attractions down the line. Who wouldn't want to ride a tamed Leviathan Maw?" He paused, taking a deep, satisfied breath of what was once toxic air. "Just thought you'd like to know. Plenty of space if any of you want to invest. We could use some extra hands or tentacles or whatever you guys got. Maybe we can even get you some samples of the local delicacies." He winked, a strange alien gesture to the council. Then the transmission cut out. The chamber erupted in a cacophony of whispers and agitated chitters. "They have turned Draxxus Cinder into a colony world," Zarthus murmured, the words heavy with disbelief. "They have tamed the untamable. They have mastered the unmasterable, and they want us to invest." Viridian simply stared at the blank screen, his face a mask of profound thought. The Survival Proving Grounds program had yielded results far beyond anyone's wildest or darkest imagination. The humans weren't just resilient. They were a force that didn't merely adapt to challenges. They transformed the challenges themselves into opportunities, even turning a profit doing it.
The implications of humanity's actions on Draxxus Cinder sent shockwaves through the Galactic Council. The debate raged for cycles. Some argued for immediate intervention, a show of force to remind humanity of the Council's authority and galactic order. Others advocated for complete isolation, fearing the contagion of their chaotic influence. But many, particularly those like Admiral Viridian and Commander Zarthus, knew deep down that both options were, at best, futile and at worst, disastrous. How do you contain a species that finds solutions where others see only death? How do you isolate a people who can turn an Exterminator Class 10+ world into a burgeoning resource hub, then invite you to buy shares? The final report presented to the Council was concise, terrifying, and indisputable. Status of Draxxus Cinder. Now officially reclassified from Exterminator Class 10+ to Human-Controlled Resource World, High Potential. The planet's ecosystem, once a symbol of wild, untamed danger, was now structured and optimized for human use. Its air was breathable in designated zones, its storms mitigated, its resources actively extracted. Status of Leviathan Maws. Wild population reduced by an astounding 87% within 2 standard cycles. Domesticated population thriving, fulfilling roles ranging from heavy labor, clearing terrain, aiding mining, to atmospheric regulation, using controlled sonic emissions. Some, terrifyingly, were even being trained as guardian beasts for human outposts, or, more bizarrely, for recreational racing, as one intercepted clip suggested. Humanality's physiological and psychological profile. Data analysis showed an unprecedented combination of aggressive adaptability, innovative problem-solving, and a seemingly boundless capacity for defying perceived limits. Their fear response to extreme danger often manifested not as panic, but as intense focus and an almost playful drive to dominate the source of that fear. Their concept of impossible seemed to be purely theoretical. The most chilling line in the report read, "Humanity does not adapt to the environment, it adapts the environment to humanity." During the final council session, the holographic display showed a live feed from Draxxus Cinder. It was a thriving human settlement, bathed in the stabilized green glow of the planet. Domesticated Leviathan Maws, their immense forms, surprisingly docile, moved among human workers, their sonic emitters gently humming, maintaining perfectly breathable air.
Children, small and vulnerable by galactic standards, laughed as they played near the colossal beasts, completely unafraid, even patting their armored hides. One child was observed attempting to feed a Leviathan Maw a processed nutrient bar, an act that would have been instantly fatal just cycles ago. Commander Draxxus, watching the children, felt a profound shift in his understanding. It wasn't just about conquering, it was about normalizing the impossible. For these human children, a domesticated Leviathan Maw was as normal as a pet back on Earth. It was deeply unsettling. Admiral Viridian stood before the council, his voice resonating through the hushed chamber. We established the Survival Proving Grounds program to understand humanity's limits. What we have learned is that their limits are not biological or environmental or even logical. Their limits are dictated only by what they believe is possible, and they believe anything is possible. They treat the universe as a series of design flaws waiting for their unique brand of engineering. He paused, his gaze sweeping across the faces of the council members, seeing fear, awe, and grudging respect. We feared them as a potential invasive species. We feared their rapid expansion, but we mistook their nature. They are not merely an invasive species, they are a foundational species. They reshape entire ecosystems not to destroy, but to claim, to make it their own. They don't just find a niche, they carve one out, then install a gift shop. A venerable Xylos elder, his ancient form trembling slightly, spoke. This is an unprecedented phenomenon. They are not simply a force of nature, they are a force that commands nature. Indeed, Viridian affirmed. The Leviathan Maw was once the apex predator of Draxxus Cinder. It ruled through brute force and primal fear. But humanity, with its intellect, its persistence, and its sheer audacity, has dethroned it. They are the new apex predator not just of this world, but potentially of any world they choose to inhabit. And they appear to be having quite a bit of fun doing it. The final transmission from John, the human leader, came unexpectedly. It wasn't a formal report, but a casual, almost philosophical message. His scarred face filled the screen, a subtle weariness in his eyes, but also an enduring, unconquerable spirit. "Hey, Council," he began, his voice calm, the familiar chuckle absent for a moment. "I know you've been watching, and I know what you're thinking. You're thinking we're crazy. Maybe we are. Probably." He looked around his flourishing settlement, then back at the camera. "We didn't ask to be here. We didn't choose Draxxus Cinder, but once we were here, we had a choice. Lie down and die, or stand up and fight. And for humans, fight doesn't just mean hitting things. It means learning, adapting, innovating. And yeah, sometimes it means eating things that try to eat you, especially if they're well marbled." He paused, then continued, his voice taking on a more serious, almost defiant tone. "You see the Leviathan Maws as monsters. We saw them as a challenge, a source of food, energy, and a whole lot of untapped potential. Every single world we've ever settled, every hardship we've faced, it's been the same story. We figure it out. We find a way. Not because we're stronger or faster or tougher than everything else, but because we don't give up. We learn, we change, we make the impossible possible. We call it Tuesday." He looked directly into the camera, a piercing gaze that seemed to challenge every species in the council chamber. "You tried to define our limits by putting us in hell. All you did was show us that even hell can be, well, domesticated. And frankly, it's got great real estate now." A slow, wry smile touched his lips. "So yeah, we're still here. And we're not going anywhere. We thrive where others die. We build where others flee. We don't just survive, we claim. And if you're ever in the neighborhood, feel free to drop by for a Maw burger. They're surprisingly lean." The transmission ended. The council chamber remained in a stunned silence. No one had an answer. No one knew what to do.
The species they had sought to monitor, perhaps even to contain, had emerged not merely as survivors, but as something far more profound. Admiral Viridian slowly turned towards the assembled council members, his voice barely a whisper, yet it resonated with absolute certainty. "We observe, we learn, and we remember." He exhaled, a deep, heavy sigh. Humans do not recognize limits. They merely see challenges to be overcome and worlds to be claimed, and apparently gourmet meals to be discovered. Zarthus felt an uneasy chill run through him, a realization that settled deep into his very being. The Leviathan Maws had ruled Draxxus Cinder for centuries, symbols of insurmountable power, but now they were merely a footnote in the planet's new history. There was a new force, a different kind of predator, and it had proven that no challenge was too great, no environment too hostile, and no apex predator too fearsome to stand in the way of its relentless will to survive, adapt, and ultimately to conquer. And perhaps to make a little profit and have a good time doing it.